Hi everyone, I'm going to do a closing video on what does it mean to be Baptist, and specifically we're saying what does it mean to be Baptist today? Where do Baptists sit at the moment? Well, that's a really hard question to answer, by the way, and that's why I've done my hair specially. Not because I've woken up and and I haven't brushed it, but actually I looked in the mirror and I thought, you know what, like that, my hair today matches kind of where the Baptist Church is, I think, and that's not. I hope that's not been too critical, but part of being Baptist is this key idea of freedom for self-expression. And that means that when you go to a church in Belize, then you hop across to Australia, then you hop across to South America, then you go to Africa, then you come to Europe, entirely different contexts, different flavors of church. And on one side, that's a beautiful story. But on the other side, that's a challenge because it's like, okay, well, what does it really mean to be Baptist in all these different contexts? So, the Baptist World Alliance, I'll start with one of the umbrella organizations. And again, this is just some of the Baptist churches worldwide, but under their auspices, churches and denominations and groups and nations that are affiliated with them, this is what they say. Under their umbrella, there's 51 million Baptists around the world, so a significant number. They operate in 128 nations, and there's 246 different conventions that would report to them. And again, it's not hierarchical. These are just churches and conventions that have gathered together and said, yeah, we are similar, and we're going to go and work together through the Baptist World Alliance. And then it comes down to this, that there is 176,000 churches connected with the Baptist World Alliance. So significant numbers, and you can go on their website, and I did that this morning actually, and I just scrolled down all the nations that they're in every continent except for Antarctica. So, and I'm sure there's some scientists who are Baptists down in Antarctica too, but it's this global reach. And then with this great reach and this diversity, then of course the questions always come back, okay, this is who we were in the past, but what does this really mean for us today? So, in this textbook, which is, we've been using this, and it's a very helpful book looking at the past, but then at the end, there's a chapter saying, where are we now? What the future is going to be. And of course, anyone who predicts the future, you're kind of on thin ice, aren't you? But I think there's some things that we can state about where we are now, and then at least get a sense of where maybe things might go in the future. So Walter Sheridan wrote about the 4 freedoms of Baptists. So that's where I want to start. And he said, these are the key things in today. The Baptists are all about freedom. We need Bible freedom, soul freedom, church freedom, and religious freedom. So in other words, he's kind of looking at the core things, and I think he wrote that in 85, but I think that's really quite wise, and I think it's maybe a little bit more transferable, dare I say it, than some of the Baptist distinctives that when you go to a different culture, they may say, maybe not. But I think I think most Baptist churches, if not all Baptist churches, would affirm Bible freedom, soul freedom, church freedom, and religious freedom. So I think those big ideas stand true and are really healthy. So in Babington, in that book that I just held up, there are 7 strands that he talks about. So as we've gone through Baptist history for hundreds of years, different cultures, different examples, he says that there are 7 strands of the church, and they all say, we are definitely Baptist, but they have uniquenesses. And the first, he said, is the liberal wing of the church. And not surprisingly, it's the liberal Baptists would be mainly in the developed world, in Europe and in North America, and they would certainly ordain people that other churches wouldn't. Different views on same-sex marriage and LGBTQ and those types of things, among others. They really take religious freedom and religious liberty and say we haven't gone far enough. So a similar cry, a similar perspective than people in the past would have said to the established church. So yeah, interesting. So you may come across churches and individuals that would say, I'm a liberal Baptist. So that's one strand of the church today. And then a pretty common strand next would be the evangelical church, the evangelical Baptists. And this, I think every church that I've ever come across in North America, at least, and in the UK, would say we are evangelical. And of course, this goes back to the very beginning of Baptist churches, but I think it can't be overstated the effect of Billy Graham. So you go back into the 60s, 70s, 80s, where you've got these big names and a global name like Billy Graham, and then certainly in those days, being evangelical and reaching out and sharing the gospel with people was at the forefront there, and it certainly that carries on to this day. So you have liberal, evangelical, and then premillennial. I haven't come across this too much, but just from reading what Babington was saying, that there's some more in the States, that there would be churches that focus on the second coming of Christ, the imminent return of Jesus, and that's very important to them, and they focus on that. So I don't have much experience with that. However, that is a strand of the church that exists. Fourthly, charismatic. And the charismatic movement has impacted every church, and I think it's been a good thing by and large, a challenging thing for some churches, but Baptists are not immune to this. So there would be very charismatic churches. They're interested in more expressive worship, certainly interested in the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And those gifts haven't ceased, and would try and seek to exercise those gifts. Fifthly, Calvinistic. In our area, to my knowledge, I think there's only one or two churches that would actually say Reformed Baptist, but that's just our little corner. And that's actually a church just down the road from us. I did a funeral with the pastor from there yesterday, so we were talking about that, and he was discussing how there used to be a church, a Reformed Baptist church, within 20 minutes in every direction, and those churches have closed. So in this area, I would say there are Baptist pastors in CBAC churches that are Calvinistic, all very close to the Reformed tradition. However, there aren't a huge amount of churches in New Brunswick that I've seen anyway that would actually say no, we're not part of the CBAC. We are joined with the Reformed group. So anyway, that's pretty small percentage where we are, but I know my brother's a pastor of a Reformed Baptist church in Michigan, and it's quite strong over there. Sixthly, the affinity to the Anabaptists. So obviously, going back to the very beginning, roots in Holland, then that's often debated. What's the influence of the Anabaptists to those original Baptists? And we can debate that. But what is certainly known, post-World War II in the States and into the 60s, I believe, there was quite an influence and quite a lot of research and an interest in the South of returning back to Anabaptist roots. Again, that's not my context, but in that area, there was certainly a desire to do that. Lastly, we have the High Church. And again, this is not super common, but my sister-in-law actually goes to one of these churches. Most churches, I think, have become a bit freer in the CBAC in our context, maybe taking on more modern worship music. But there are still those churches, especially in large towns, in historic towns, and they may be called First Baptist Church. And they would be quite traditional, still do liturgy, choirs, responsive readings and that kind of thing, and then they may view communion and use more language that would be more Catholic in its nature, maybe call it a sacrament. Anyway, there's nuances there, of course, but there are these Baptist churches that see the High Church movement actually as something very healthy indeed. So if I've said anything that was disparaging to any of these strands, that was not my intention. Simply to say that these strands exist. And of course, these strands exist, and Babington is certainly writing from a context of the developed world. But as the Baptist Church spreads and is rapidly spreading around the world, some of these strands will grow stronger. So you don't have to be brilliant to understand that the charismatic movement is responsible in all kinds of denominations for a great amount of growth, a great amount of health around the world. So I would say the charismatic movement will become much more influential in the years to come. And of course, it's very influential today. And as we look at the distinctives, which you can look at 2 other videos I've done about those distinctives, as they move into a different context, if you're in Nigeria, let's say, well, you may have some distinctives that really, really matter and others that maybe less so. So every time period is a challenge, and you have to re-look at those distinctives and say, do they really work in our context? And I'm sure everybody emphasizes some of the distinctives more than another. But this is where, going back to what I said at the beginning about Sheridan's 4 freedoms, I think are maybe easier for us to unite under. And again, to remind us, he said biblical freedom, soul freedom, church freedom, and religious freedom. And the banner over all those is that Baptists are all about freedom. Church freedom, individual freedom, freedom from persecution, freedom for all people. So, what does the future hold? Well, we just had the eclipse here, and maybe we were getting all kind of getting prophetic. I have no idea what the future holds, but I think as the center of the church is moving to the global south and their voices are heard more and more, that can only be a good thing. However, it's also a bit, it discombobulates us. And some of the things that we emphasized and said, this is central, they may say, well, that's a secondary issue. It's not as important as you're saying. So I find that really fascinating, and I actually wrestle with that quite a bit, because we have people coming into our churches all the time and they're not Baptist at all. And then they come in and they say, well, we love this church, but we've got no interest in that particular distinctive. So this is something that we're wrestling with globally, nationally, provincially, regionally, but also we wrestle with in each and every church. So, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed looking at what does it mean to be Baptist? And honestly, I think the key things are going to remain the same, but then as new people come in, then things get nuanced, don't they? And things change. And as we grow and develop and become more wise in our faith, and we've seen more things, then maybe even our perspectives change from what they are today. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this look at what's it mean to be Baptist through these 6 videos and the questions that we've been asking. And I'd love you to reach out and chat with me, and if you've got any questions that you have. All right, blessings, take care.